What if the words you've ignored your whole life were the very key to unlocking who you really are? Carl Jung didn't just write theories, he left behind warnings, truths, and shadows that echo deep inside us. Today, I'll take you through 7 haunting quotes from Jung, quotes so piercing that once you hear them, you'll never be able to look at yourself the same way again. Before we dive deep, hit that subscribe button and join us, because stories like these aren't just for listening, they're for awakening. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." The first time I stumbled across these words, I felt as though someone had just turned on a flashlight in a room I didn't know I was living in. For years, I had believed that the twists and turns of my life were coincidences, strokes of luck or misfortune, but Jung's words suggested something far more unsettling, that I was the architect of my own suffering without even knowing it. This thought haunted me because it forced me to confront the possibility that every self-sabotage, every broken relationship, every moment I had felt cursed was in fact a script written not by destiny, but by the hidden parts of myself. As I walked the dimly lit streets that evening, I kept repeating the quote in my mind, trying to wrestle with its weight, and suddenly memories from my childhood surfaced, moments when I felt invisible, when I learned to shrink myself so others could shine. I realized those unconscious lessons were still running the show, even now, making me small, making me silent, making me surrender to what I called fate. And in that realization, I felt the first ripple of change, a terror, but also a strange liberation, because if I had created this prison unconsciously, maybe I could dismantle it consciously. The second quote that carved itself into my bones was, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." At first, I scoffed at it, thinking of how easy it was to point at others, at society, at people drowning in distractions. But then I saw myself reflected in it, the hours I had wasted scrolling endlessly on my phone, the meaningless conversations, the shallow pursuits, the desperate clinging to busyness so I would never have to sit in silence with myself. Jung was right. I would rather run toward absurdity than face the chaos inside me. And I began to wonder, what would it look like to finally stop running? To sit in a room without a screen, without a book, without even a notebook, and simply listen to what my soul had been trying to say for decades. The thought chilled me, because silence was terrifying, like staring into an abyss that might never end. Yet I realized the absurdity was worse, living an entire life and never once hearing the sound of my own truth. The third quote that clung to me like a shadow was, "Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darknesses of other people." This one hurt because I had spent so much of my life pretending to be the good one, the one who didn't get angry, the one who didn't resent, the one who forgave too quickly, smiled too easily, nodded too obediently. But beneath the surface, a storm raged. I hated admitting jealousy, rage, or bitterness, and so I buried them. Yet because I buried them, they leaked out in twisted ways, silent treatments, passive-aggressive remarks, cold distances. And every time I encountered someone else's darkness, I felt overwhelmed, judgmental, or afraid. Jung's words revealed the irony. By refusing to face my own shadow, I was at the mercy of everyone else's. But what if I turned inward? What if I met my anger, my jealousy, my resentment like old friends instead of monsters? Perhaps then, the shadows of others would not frighten me so deeply. Perhaps then, compassion would not be an act but a natural response. Then came the fourth quote, the one that echoed through me like a thunderclap: "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." I laughed nervously the first time I read it because, like many people, I thought I had already accepted myself. But had I really? Acceptance, real acceptance, meant embracing not just the polished version I showed the world, but the messy, contradictory, shame-filled parts one tried so hard to hide. Acceptance meant looking at the moments I had betrayed others, the times I had lied, the nights I had given into temptations, the mornings I woke up hating myself. Acceptance meant staring into the mirror and not turning away when I saw both the saint and the sinner staring back. And that was terrifying, because what if the sinner outweighed the saint? What if, in accepting myself, I discovered I was far less noble than I had ever pretended to be? Yet Jung insisted this was the path to wholeness. That without acceptance, life became a battle of masks, and true freedom was forever out of reach. The fifth quote haunted me in a quieter, subtler way: "Loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you. It struck me because I had always wondered why, even in rooms full of laughter, even at parties, even in crowds, I sometimes felt devastatingly alone. I thought maybe I wasn't likable enough, maybe I hadn't found my people, but Jung's words peeled back the curtain. Loneliness came not from absence, but from the presence of silence, my silence. The truths I carried, the questions that burned inside me, the fears I dared not name, the dreams I thought too fragile to speak aloud, these were the walls keeping me separated from everyone. And suddenly I understood why conversations often felt hollow, why I left gatherings emptier than when I arrived. I wasn't communicating the things that mattered. I wasn't risking vulnerability. And so I was lonely, not because the world had abandoned me, but because I had abandoned my own voice. The sixth quote was like a mirror I wanted to smash. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. On the surface, it sounded beautiful, like a motivational mantra. But when I thought about it deeply, it terrified me, because it meant that so far, I hadn't really lived that privilege. I had lived as who I thought others wanted me to be, the dutiful child, the agreeable friend, the dependable employee. I had lived inside roles, not reality. Becoming who I truly was felt like a rebellion, and rebellion is always dangerous. Who would I disappoint? Who would I lose? What bridges would burn? But then another thought followed, darker still. What if I never dared? What if I spent an entire lifetime imprisoned by roles, only to die having never once been myself? That thought made my chest tighten, because perhaps the greatest tragedy of life was not losing others, but losing yourself before you ever got the chance to live as you. And then came the seventh quote, the one that lingered like smoke long after the fire had burned. Who looks outside, dreams, who looks inside, awakes. At first glance, it seemed simple, almost poetic, but the more I thought about it, the heavier it grew. My whole life, I had looked outside, toward approval, toward love, toward success, toward recognition. I had dreamed of being seen, of being chosen, of being validated. And though I sometimes caught glimpses of those dreams, they always dissolved quickly, like smoke in the wind. Awakening, Jung said, came only from looking inward. But inward was the one place I had resisted most. 2. Awaken meant to stop searching for someone else to give me the answer, the permission, the love. To awaken meant to see that all along, the one I had been waiting for was myself. As I pieced together these 7 haunting quotes, a new kind of narrative formed, not a story of fate, but of awakening. It was as though Jung had handed me a mirror and forced me to look, not at the polished surface I had shown the world, but at the cracks, the fractures, the hidden depths. Each quote pulled me deeper into confrontation with myself, peeling away layers of denial, distraction, and pretense. It was painful, yes, but also necessary. Because beneath the pain lay something raw, something real, something alive. I realized that perhaps the reason Jung's words haunt us is not because they are cruel, but because they are true. They strip away the illusions we cling to, the lies we tell ourselves, the comforts that keep us asleep. They haunt us because they awaken us. And once you awaken, you cannot go back to sleep. By the time I finished reflecting on these 7 quotes, I felt as though I had lived several lifetimes in a single night. I saw myself differently. I saw the people around me differently. I saw life itself differently. And though I knew the journey was far from over, I also knew one thing for certain: I would never be able to look at myself the same way again. Jung's words had changed me. They had unsettled me. They had broken me open. And in that breaking, I found the beginning of becoming whole. If these words shook something inside you, don't let that feeling fade. Reflect on them. Write them down. Sit with them in silence. Because the moment you confront your shadow is the moment you begin to truly live. And if you want more stories that pierce deeper than comfort and awaken the truths you've hidden from yourself, subscribe now. This is not just content, it's a mirror, and sometimes the hardest thing we can do is dare to look.